Week 12 brought a quite a different brand of madness. The bipocalypse hit others. Others went nuts. It kind of depended if you had Saquon Barkley. We'll talk about that and a lot more on the Week 12 RotoWire reactions.
We're proud to be brought to you by
We're smashing buttons and talking about random things and forgetting lines and all that. It's great. Jeff Erickson here with Nick Whalen on the RotoWire Week 12 Reactions podcast. I'm with Scott Fishbowl, overall leader currently, Nick Whalen. There's, Monday might change that, but hey, savor the flavor. When you've got a chance to be there, you got to kind of enjoy it.
Yeah, man. I knew I had a big week going in the Scott Fishbowl. I did not check the standings until you messaged me this morning. And yeah, I mean, we're up over 275 points for the week. I have not myself to thank. I have Jonnu Smith, Jalen Waddle, and Saquon Barkley, who in that format gave me 54.2 fantasy points with another just ridiculous Saquon game last night. But yeah, a lot to piece through, man. I mean, 6 teams on bye this week. You're thinking, all right, maybe it's going to be a little bit of an abbreviated slate. Let's get to week 13 where we have everybody playing. We got these fun, standalone games. But I think this was maybe the most chaotic week of the NFL season so far.
Yeah, absolutely. The early slate, and it was just bonkers at the end there. Just so many wild finishes, so many unexpected games too. Yeah. And we'll talk about like Dallas and Washington, Tennessee and Houston, sneaky. In terms of its wildness there. Bears, Vikings was bananas. It was great. But we're going to start off, though, with the cheat code. Saquon Barkley and the Eagles smashing the Rams on Sunday Night Football.
37-20 was the final score here. I was on the Eagles. That was one of my official picks for Bookies Plus. I also noted that I like the under, so I can't do too much of a victory lap here. I thought the Rams would provide a little bit more resistance defensively. We got the typical slow start from the Philadelphia Eagles, just a field goal for Philly in the first quarter. They did put up 10 points in the second, but this was only a 13-7 game at the half. And the Eagles did what they do most weeks, which is get better and better with that running game as the game goes along. We started to see the Rams defense wear down. I mean, it was very reminiscent, I thought, of last week's Eagles game where, they're kind of running into a wall. They're moving the ball, but they're not putting up a ton of points. And then all of a sudden it's Saquon long run after Saquon long run. AJ Brown had himself a really nice night as well with no Devontae Smith. But I mean, this has become kind of the Saquon season, right? I mean, he's on pace now for over 2,100 rushing yards. He's down to 5-1 to win the MVP. I wouldn't bet that given the historical precedent, but he's at least in the conversation at this point. 11 games into the year, he's got 1,392 yards, 12 touchdowns. Adrian Peterson, by the way, the year that he won the MVP, I believe that was 2012, the last running back to do it. Through 11 games, he only had 1,236 yards and 7 touchdowns. So that's the kind of all-time pace that Saquon Barkley is on right now after putting up 255 yards on the ground. He's up to 266 PPR points on the year. By comparison, Christian McCaffrey had 273 at this point last season. So he's kind of neck and neck as far as McCaffrey, who, of course, was the RB1 by over 100 fantasy points last year. And also, to make a 2023 versus 24 comparison, 5 running backs right now have at least 200 PPR points on the year. Last year, we only had 2 at this point. So it continues to be the year of the running back in fantasy.
It is, but they're not all the same. I mean, you had a choice often between Barkley and Jonathan Taylor, and one of those went amazing, and the other is getting increasingly frustrating. So, and again, we'll talk Colts here a little bit. But, it's definitely a case there where, if you were at the back end of the first round, you're probably doing pretty well in a lot of leagues if you went this route. And by the way, Tyler, we will answer questions. We'll get to that when we get to the specific game. So, but yeah, it's just end of the first round, doing pretty well right now.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, if you look at the NFFC, for example, right now, you take a look at the overall leaderboard, and nobody who's near the top drafted in the top 3. One guy in the top 15 had a top 5 pick, but overwhelmingly it's people who picked 6th, 7th, 9th, 11th, 12th. Obviously, if you picked first and you took McCaffrey, you're just not really going to be in the running. But you're right. I mean, the opportunity to take someone like Jamar Chase and then turn around and grab Saquon Barkley. If you doubled up and took Barkley and Derrick Henry or Barkley and Bijan Robinson, you're doing really well. Obviously, Lamar Jackson on the quarterback side of things has been fantastic. He's still number one in terms of total fantasy points on the year, but Saquon Barkley, going into tonight, is only 10 points behind Lamar on the season, and Jamar Chase only about 25 behind Lamar. So those have kind of been the big three cheat codes: Lamar, Barkley, and Jamar.
Yeah, in fact, I think it was Tom Kesnick that was posting. I think it was on Blue Sky. I forget if it was on Twitter or on Blue Sky. Now I have to check both all the time. But he was saying that the most first place teams, the player most on first place teams in the NFFC, I think this is in the prime time, was Jamar Chase. But it was Chase and Burrow, and then Chuba Hubbard was third. Now I don't know if that includes this week's action though, or because obviously that could flip things quite a bit. But pretty comfortable place to be. If you had Jalen Hurts, you still got in this game. You didn't get those rushing touchdowns. I have Hurts and AJ Brown and Scott Fishbowl. So I was having a pretty good week until like in the morning slate. I had a lot of good things happen there. Afternoon slate was a disaster, but then I had Hurts and I had Brown and I got by with those. I'll move on to the next round, but I'm not in the Whalen zone.
Yeah, man. I've gotten pretty lucky in that league. I'm not gonna lie. Bucky Irving obviously has been better than I ever expected. Jonnu Smith, especially in a tight end premium league like the Scott Fishbowl. I mean, he's become crazy valuable. Cortland Sutton did it again this week. We'll talk about him when we hit Broncos-Raiders, but he's been quietly one of the best values at wide receiver as well. But to put a bow on Eagles-Rams, I mean, it felt like the Saquon game. There's not a whole lot to say on the Rams side of things. I mean, they once again kind of struggled to run the ball. Kyron Williams, 16 carries for just 72 yards, did get in the end zone, so he bailed you out there. Puka Nacua had himself a great night, 9 for 117, had a couple long plays called back as well. Could have been a bigger night. Cooper Kupp got the late touchdown to finish 860 and a score. But overall, I mean, this was an emphatic performance, I thought, by Philadelphia, which, early in the game, I was thinking, man, I kind of wish I would have taken the Rams. They're the team moving the ball more. But the turnovers, the offensive line play, I think, really caught up to the LA Rams as this game went along. Huge break, by the way, for the San Francisco 49ers, who got smacked by the Green Bay Packers yesterday. But the Cardinals end up losing to Seattle. That was big. And then this Rams loss, kind of keeps the NFC West with all these teams within one game of each other.
Exactly right. The fumble by Kyron Williams early was huge. Kind of surprised we didn't see any Blake Corum, and more than one carry from Blake Corum. Still, they just don't want to turn to him at all. They're a little bit there, but you're right. Offensive line play was the big thing. Stafford got sacked 5 times and got hit many others. It's a miracle he didn't have any interceptions. He played very well considering the circumstances. But that fumble was massive in that game. There was a couple, the AJ Brown touchdown that initially wasn't ruled a touchdown was pretty big on that, but it was the right call. But it's still nonetheless, there was the challenge flag on the Kyron Williams fumble that wasn't seen by the refs. I was wondering if we're going to be able to challenge whether you could see a challenge flag. But
the challenge.
Yeah, exactly. There's all sorts of wacky refereeing stories. The SEC officials on Saturday night had themselves a night. The Bama game, I don't know if you were watching any of that, but Bama would have lost anyhow, but they had a touchdown call back and a completely wrong call. The Auburn overtime game against Texas A&M had a couple of huge, impactful, seemingly wrong calls too. So refereeing weekend was very interesting there. Let's move on. You alluded to it. The Niners caught a break. They were terrible, awful, but they caught a break by the Rams losing. But the Niners emphatically got beat by the Packers. This one wasn't close.
It sure wasn't. 38-10 Green Bay. I think kind of in retrospect, maybe the type of game you'd expect with a backup quarterback in there and Brandon Allen. He finished 17 of 29 for 199, a touchdown and a pick. He was not disastrous though by any means. No. Tough conditions. Excuse me. Of course, playing on the road in Green Bay. I thought Deebo Samuel had a couple drops. One of which went right through his hands and resulted in an interception. So things really got away quickly from the 49ers, who ran 3 plays in the first quarter. I mean, that was really the bigger issue. It's like you don't expect much of an offensive upside when you're rolling out a backup quarterback. You got injuries all over the roster. Trent Williams didn't play. Nick Bosa didn't play. But the defense just could not hold down Green Bay, specifically the running game. And the Packers committed early to riding Josh Jacobs and Emmanuel Wilson. And the Niners just had no answers, man. I mean, Josh Jacobs, incredible at not taking losses. Every time it looks like, oh, this is going to be blown up for a 2 or 3 yard loss, he somehow finds his way back to the line of scrimmage. Feels like every single run he's tacking on 1, 2, 3 extra yards when most backs would go down. Since the start of the 2020 season, by the way, so we're talking almost 5 years, only 4 players have run for 100+ yards on the Niners. Jacobs yesterday, Aaron Jones in the playoffs last year. Then you have to go all the way back to 2021 for Justin Fields and Jonathan Taylor, who did it. So a rare outing, where this Niners defense is not able to stop the run. Thought Green Bay did an excellent job of controlling the clock. They were on the other side of that, last week against Chicago, where it felt like they barely had the ball. They had the ball almost this entire game. Of course, first 2 Niners drives being quick 3 and outs helped. Josh Jacobs, one more note on him, by the way, 15 forced missed tackles in this game. The most by any running back in any game this season. 15 is a crazy number. Green Bay just kind of put everything together. They did have the monster drop by Christian Watson.
Oh my goodness. I was just going to mention that. Yeah.
That basically would have ended the game before halftime. And that was brutal. You get a couple plays every year like that from Christian Watson. It was reminiscent of the week 1 drop against Minnesota a couple of years ago in Rodgers' final season.
Yes.
Quay Walker also dropped an easy interception in the first half. He has more dropped interceptions than any other player in the NFL over the last 3 seasons. If you're a Packers fan, you're nodding along saying, yes, this definitely passes the eye test. But things started to get a little bit dicey. After the Watson drop, the Niners are putting a drive together. They start moving the ball early in the third quarter. Huge interception by Xavier McKinney, his 7th of the year, returned that deep into San Francisco territory. And at that point, you just kind of felt like it was over.
Yeah. They had the long kickoff return by Debo called back at the start of the second half, too.
So many penalties for the Niners.
Oh, yeah. Brutal game all around. I got to ask you, though, they're 5-6 now. You don't know if, if Purdy's going to be able to play next week. Yep. You don't know if Trent Williams is going to be able to play next week. We don't know if Debo has anything left. Right? I'm sure he has something left, but, can it get unlocked with this current iteration of the Niners? The rest of the offensive line isn't good. Is this kind of era done for the Niners?
They're on the ropes, man. They're 4-1 right now to make the postseason. No team in the NFC West, by the way, is minus money. You got the Cardinals at plus 125, Seattle plus 150, Rams plus 350. But the Niners are still the long shot technically in that division. I'm not closing the book quite yet. Again, they got a lot of help this week. Despite losing this game, you're still hanging around in that division. You're only 1 game back of first place. And sure. I think the Niners, you can make the case that in some ways they control their own destiny. I don't think you expect any other team in the NFC West to just win out the rest of the way, but they have to go to Buffalo in week 13 for Sunday Night Football. I mean, that is a brutal spot to be with a potentially banged up quarterback or a quarterback who could miss another game. You mentioned the other injuries. After that, it's the Bears, the Rams, the Dolphins, the Lions, and the Cardinals. So they still have 2 more head-to-head matchups in division against LA and Arizona. Again, not writing off the 49ers. I think if they get healthy, they're still, to me, they've earned it reputationally. They're still the most dangerous team in that division. I think if you're a team, if you're a fan of the Packers or the Vikings, that's still a team that you wouldn't want to face on the road in the wild card round. But yeah, man, I mean, if they go get smoked by Buffalo and, the rest of the NFC West has success this weekend, things are going to get really, really uncomfortable, I think, both for this team and for Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah, exactly. They're 1-3 in division. I think that's the other thing too. I mean, that really hurts them a lot. They lose a lot of tiebreakers. They got to win those last 2 games to have really much of a chance at all. Okay, let's move on from the Niners. Let's talk a little Vikings-Bears. This was kind of the Vikings were in control. They were in control. All of a sudden, here come the Bears. Successful onside kick. Just, great drive to get within 3 to begin with. They get the game time field goal. Like they get the ball to start the overtime. And then they had Caleb Williams was awesome in this game, but he took a bizarro sack on that on the overtime drive where he held the ball. It felt like 8 seconds and then got sacked. I don't understand what happened there, but all in all, I 2 weeks in a row now, Caleb Williams has played well while the Bears have lost. It's kind of if you're not going to make the playoffs, it's kind of the best case scenario.
Oh yeah, I think that's the sentiment that I saw from Bears fans on Twitter over the weekend. Is this is exactly what we want. We want development from our offense. We want Caleb Williams to play like he did in this one, and we want to lose because at this point they're out of it. I think in the NFC as far as playoffs go. So you're just thinking about that draft pick and adding another piece to this core. The Vikings, led this game by 11 points with 25 seconds left in the fourth quarter. This is the lone blemish on the Circa Millions card for this week. We had the Vikings minus 3.5. They, of course, end up winning by 3 in overtime. Just brutal, man. Just brutal. Not recovering that onside kick. It didn't even go 10 yards. I don't know if it was going to go 10 yards. Just a brutal job by one of their reserve tight ends who did what he was coached to do, which is, get up there and block, but had no awareness of where the ball was, went right off his leg. I mean, there was no real controversy there. It was the right call. And of course, the Bears are instantly able to work it into field goal range. That's the other part of it. It's not like you just get it, you could kick right away. Like, you still have a chance, if you're Minnesota to try to stop them from moving it into range. They were unable to do that. But overall, I mean, this was a monster game, I thought, from Caleb Williams. I mean, he had 3 or 4 of his 10 best throws of the entire year in this game. I mean, I think I've never seen a team, this being Minnesota, have so many plays where a defender is diving at the ball and just barely misses it. I mean, it felt like every single completion. It's like Andrew Van Ginkel and Harrison Smith are like an inch away from tipping that ball. And Caleb Williams was just firing darts, man. I mean, the one down the sideline where it was a USC Caleb Williams play, right? Where he's evading pressure. Looks like he's going to step out of bounds. At the last second, he whips a perfect throw over the shoulder. Great catch by DeAndre Swift. I mean, this was, I thought, pretty easily the most impressive game of the year for Caleb Williams. That overtime sack was brutal. You just got to throw it away there. That put him in a spot where they essentially had to punt after, it was like 3rd and 20 something. But other than that, he was fantastic. And the Bears had a few drops too. I mean, Keenan Allen had himself a big day, but could have had more. There were a couple red zone instances where the Bears just couldn't quite convert. But overall, I was really, really impressed with Caleb.
Yeah. On a day where they couldn't run at all, they were able to do this. I mean, Caleb was their leading rusher also, 33 rushing yards. That's not a good sign if you have DeAndre Swift. My Roschon Johnson pickup in stake league, I got the touchdown out of him, but 2 carries. So that's all there is to it. He didn't do a whole lot there. On the Minnesota side, everybody but Justin Jefferson ate. It was a weird day where the Bears just dedicated all their resources to stopping Jefferson and allowed everybody else to do what they could do. Aaron Jones, 22 for 106 in the touchdown and 3 catches also. Jordan Addison had himself a monster day, 8 for 162. Even TJ Hawkinson, 7 for 114, including that big catch in overtime.
Yeah, I thought Sam Darnold, he was his usual shaky Sam Darnold at times. Didn't turn the ball over, which was nice, but made some big throws, especially on 3rd downs late in this game. Hanging in the pocket, looking like he's about to get sacked, and then finding a wide open Hawkinson. Found Justin Jefferson for one of his only 2 catches over the middle. That extended their final drive. Jordan Addison was fantastic, like you said. So I think on balance, this was actually a pretty good Sam Darnold game. He was injured, by the way, midway through the fourth quarter. We briefly saw Nick Mullins come in, and he immediately came in and converted a 3rd and 13 with a nice dump off to Aaron Jones, who did the rest of the work to extend that drive. Again, it felt like Minnesota had this game wrapped up like 2 or 3 times, and then when you mess up an onside kick, that's just kind of what's going to happen. In terms of other fantasy notes here, full workload for Aaron Jones. Played almost all the snaps offensively, got his first touchdown since week 7, only his 3rd rushing touchdown of the year. You mentioned Jefferson, 2 for 27. A lot of the credit goes to the Bears defense for making a point to stop him. There's a reason Addison had the day that he did. Jefferson is still the wide receiver 4 on the year in total PPR points, but really only has like 1 or 2 splash games. Last year, his point total at this point would have made him the wide receiver 10. So that wide receiver 4 designation speaks more to just kind of the overall downtrend of receivers on this year. He just has 1 touchdown in his last 7 games. Kevin O'Connell, he is now 23-10 in 1-score games. Matt Eberflus, 5-18 in those situations.
That's a wild stat there. Now it's just a question of like when do they fire Eberflus? But
end of the season, it's happening. It's happening.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Any other notes on this game? Should we move on?
Only other thing I'll say is that the Bears have suddenly become like a pretty good 3rd down team. They converted 5 of their first 7 3rd downs after having like a month-long stretch where it felt like every game they were like 2 of 15 on 3rd downs. And a lot of that, of course, is Caleb Williams picking up confidence. 5 straight games now without an interception for Caleb. If you want to find ways to nitpick his performance, you can. Even in his bad games, though, he does not turn the ball over. And I think that is a rare trait for a rookie quarterback. The Bears have not gone 5 straight games without an interception in almost 100 years. Yeah.
I think it's only fitting we talk about Jaden Daniels next after talking about Caleb Williams and his development, because Jaden Daniels has backslid a little bit, for about 53 minutes of that game against the Cowboys, the offense really did nothing in this game, only to see the fourth quarter just go absolutely off the rails.
This was maybe the most off the rails game of the entire year, all things considered. First of all, I want to issue an apology to anybody who had the under in this game. It was 13-9 with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. 13-9. And in 5 minutes of game time, almost exactly 5 minutes of game time, we had 5 touchdowns and a field goal at the end of the fourth quarter. Just unbelievable. Obviously, the play of the year, or maybe the second best player of the year, other than the Noah Brown Hail Mary, would have been Jaden Daniels finding Terry McLaurin for, I think it was a 74-yard touchdown when the Cowboys are in prevent. I don't know how that happened. I need to see the all 22.
86 yards, by the way.
86. Okay. All right. I shortchanged him. 86 yards for McLaurin. There were plenty of guys around him. Everybody took a bad angle. McLaurin just outruns the defense. Then, of course, Austin Seibert misses the extra point. I got to say, Jeff, you kind of felt like he was going to miss that. Like he had already had a disastrous kicking day, maybe making his return from injury, made his first field goal, got off to a good start. Second field goal, I've never even seen a kick like this. Like it wasn't a true shank. It was just a straight like line drive. The lowest kick trajectory I think I've ever seen that was not blocked. He ended up missing an extra point later in the game before the big missed extra point at the end. Of course, Washington gives up a kickoff return to Kevontae Turpin and then gives up another kickoff return on an onside kick. So just a bizarre end to this game. Kevontae Turpin, by the way, ended up being the wide receiver 1 in the Scott Fishbowl this week, thanks to all that return yardage.
Yeah, and because Fishbowl has special return yardage rules and all that. So yeah, just nutty game there. Four returns, 179 yards, and the touchdown was bizarre too because he muffed it, kind of took this like weird pause, did a little pivot, and went untouched. It was crazy. Yeah. Oh my gosh, it was wild there. Just just everything in that game was bonkers. Even like the onside kick return for a touchdown. Right. Where the coaching staff is like, go down. And they were right, by the way, because Washington still was able to throw a Hail Mary at the end because of all that. Everything was bizarro in that one here. Yes, Aubrey misses 2 field goals, one of which was blocked. The other he just missed off the upright there. So, it's a virus that's spreading. It's contagion. All of our good kickers are getting contagious for this. I can't talk today. Are getting affected by this. How about that? Let's switch our words.
Yeah, ironically, it's like it was Dallas that was the team, that had the disastrous special team showing in the first half, right? They start off with a blocked field goal on their first possession. Aubrey, then misses a 42-yarder, which you almost never see that from Brandon Aubrey. They had a punt blocked in this game as well. They fumbled on their third drive of the game. Like Dallas, neither team really deserved to win this game. Dallas obviously, pulled away in the second half and should have had this put away had it not been for the McLaurin play. But yeah, just a sloppy day all around on special teams for both sides. Ended up being a pretty evenly played game overall. The Washington offensive numbers get a boost just because of that long play to McLaurin. It was not a fantastic offensive day by any means for them. Jaden Daniels was far and away the Commanders' leading rusher, 7 for 74 and a touchdown. He was charged with 2 interceptions. One of those came on the final Hail Mary at the end of the fourth quarter, and the other one I thought should have been a fumble. I mean, it was a fine throw. Brian Robinson just got the ball pulled out of his arms, and they ended up ruling it an interception. So I think both of those shouldn't necessarily be held against Jaden Daniels. Something to keep an eye on going forward, by the way. Washington plays a lively Tennessee team this weekend. Brian Robinson went out 2 separate times in this game due to injury, and Austin Eckler took a huge hit late in the game on a kickoff return. He's been diagnosed with a concussion, his second of the year. So I think there's a pretty good chance one or both of those guys might not be out there in week 13.
Yep. So Jeremy McNichols is third in the depth chart, but when Robinson missed time earlier, Chris Rodriguez was active and got more carries. So this isn't just a automatic pull the McNichols lever. It might be Rodriguez too. Again, we're searching for if we're searching for running backs, and we always are. Both of those guys should be under consideration. Just realize you're not going to get a bell cow situation, and it's kind of true to this season. We're not the running backs that we picked up this year have not delivered like we'd hoped for. I mean, we'll talk about the cautionary tale of Audric Estime in a little bit, but we're just not getting that workload that we'd hope for. Anybody that picked up Dylan Laub is nodding their head a little bit too, and they're like, "Yeah, I picked up Dylan Laub. I hate myself." Yes. Abdullah didn't even get like a huge workload for the Raiders, so they brought in a guy that we didn't expect to. So again, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but just be aware. McNichols seems like a guy that will get red zone carries. That's the one thing I've noticed. So I kind of like him a little bit more than I do Rodriguez. But and obviously you're gonna have to check the practice reports. We got 4 early games this week, 3 on Thanksgiving, 1 on Friday. So also we're under pressure of time a little bit there and try to pick some of these guys up too.
Yeah, no question about it. I'm with you on McNichols. I mean, even when Eckler and Robinson have been healthy throughout this year, we still see a decent amount of McNichols in this offense, specifically in the red zone. So I think if you're looking for a commander this week, it's a bad matchup against Tennessee, a team that's been really good against the run throughout the year and did a great job, I thought, against Joe Mixon yesterday. But you just got to eat it, right? I mean, we said the same thing about Amir Abdullah coming into this Denver game, and ultimately it worked out okay, right? I mean, he got that touchdown, 8 for 28 on the ground, but 5 for 37 and a score receiving the ball. So
yeah,
I think that's ultimately the type of line that you might be looking at with McNichols. Hopefully a little bit more rushing volume. But when the pickings are slim, that's kind of what you have to resort to.
Indeed. All right, we're going to move on to the Chiefs-Panthers, Titans-Texans, and Seahawks-Cardinals next. But first, quick note from our friends over at DraftKings Pick 6.
We're proud to be brought to you by DraftKings Pick 6. So many NFL offerings each week over at Pick 6. Been enjoying playing on the Pick 6 platform each and every week of the NFL season. Think a certain quarterback will throw for more than 300 yards. How about your favorite receiver scoring a touchdown? Check out Pick 6, the newest way to play fantasy football and win cash right now with DraftKings. Here's how it works. Just pick 2 to 6 players of the same sport and choose if they'll have more or less of a given stat. Yards, catches, touchdowns, etc. Lock in those picks and compete against opponents for a shot at huge cash prizes. Download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use our code ROTOPICK. That's ROTOPICK. Again, ROTOPICK, ROTOPICK. If you're a new Pick 6 customer, play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits guaranteed. Just use that code ROTOPICK. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-78-89-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
Thank you, Nick, for doing that great read.
Of course.
Very dramatic. Thank you to DraftKings Pick 6 and their wonderful game and their sponsorship of us. Chiefs-Panthers was way better than we possibly could have dreamed of imagining. Really fun finish to that game there. And, but the Panthers all along, even when they fell behind 2 scores, they were spry in this game. They were never like, oh, we're lying down for this Chiefs team.
I think there's a case to be made that Carolina outplayed the Chiefs. I really do. I watched this entire game, subjected myself to it, did not think that this is how it would play out whatsoever. I was on the under for one of my official plays this week, and it was very clear early on that the Chiefs defense was just not going to show up here. Really the only area in which they showed up was the red zone, and that's the reason that Carolina didn't win this game straight up. They were 2 of 6 converting touchdowns in the red zone, but I thought this was maybe the best Carolina has looked in 2 or 3 years. I mean, this was one of the best games that they played, I think, given the circumstances. The game starts with a big kickoff return by Samaje Perine. Like 2 plays later, Noah Gray's wide open for a walk-in touchdown. And you're thinking, all right, this might be the game where the Chiefs, put a 40-3 smackdown on Carolina. But that was just not the case, man. The Panthers just consistently moved the ball throughout this game. They scored on 5 of their first 6 possessions on one of the best defenses in the NFL. Now, the Panthers defense was not good either. I mean, early, it just looked like target practice for Mahomes through most of the first half. But, later on, Carolina was able to generate pressure. Mahomes is taking sacks in situations where you're just right. You're so programmed to just see Patrick Mahomes outrun the defender, tiptoe his way down the sideline. All of a sudden, a 2nd and 10 becomes a 3rd and 1, and they convert on the next play. Like there were a couple just, wow, you're not used to seeing that type of plays from the Chiefs. They did have 268 yards of offense in the first half. Kansas City did. And things, started to slow down in the second. Panthers made their usual array of mistakes, a lot of false starts, a lot of missed tackles, a lot of bad angles, I thought. But Bryce Young played incredibly well. The Chiefs throughout this game brought a ton of pressure. They were bringing, 2-3 linebackers on blitzes. And I thought Bryce Young stayed in there, held on till the last second, made a lot of good throws, a lot of tough catches down the field in traffic as well. By the Carolina Panthers. Extremely frustrating game if you were on the under. Chuba Hubbard, by the way, still very much in the mix. Had himself a nice fantasy day. 86% snap share with Jonathan Brooks active. We saw just 2 carries, no targets, 5 snaps for Jonathan Brooks.
Yeah, just easing him in. And hey, I mean, the contract showed that the Panthers really do buy into Chuba Hubbard as their starter. The fact that they felt compelled to give him that extension in season, it speaks volumes. And, I think that you're going to continue to see a lot of Chuba Hubbard. He wasn't super efficient in this game, but again, no running back is against the Chiefs. So you got to be happy with what you got there. I look at this Chiefs team and I see them maybe even hanging on to the 1 seed, but they get to an AFC championship game against the Bills. And I don't think it ends well for them.
I mean, this was kind of an alarming performance, man. It was. I mean, it's not all that different from what we've seen from KC, I guess, this year. But man, I mean, the talent discrepancy here is still huge. Like even if you want to say, yeah, Carolina played their best game of the season, they were up for this game. I get that, but it should not have come down to a final possession field goal by your backup kicker. For KC to escape this game. Mahomes is now, I think, 0-5-1. As a double-digit favorite on the road in his career. These games just never seem to go well for KC. I mentioned the Carolina offense playing well, especially early on. I mean, Carolina was at 8.4 yards per play in the first half. 8.4. That is insane by Carolina standards. They're usually at like 4.5. Doing that against the KC defense. The KC offensive line, by the way, I think has some issues. The tackles in particular did not play well. It wasn't Mahomes holding the ball too long on those sacks. It was the offensive tackles just getting completely beat by the Carolina defenders. And I'm trying to think if I have any other notes here. Jatavian Sanders, somebody we've been talking about. He was injured just before the half. Kind of a weird play where he got flipped on a tackle and like all of his weight landed on his head. Long delay, ended up being carted off. So it looks like he's probably going to miss some time. Kansas City, by the way, they did end up winning this game, despite all the negative things that I'm saying. 10 straight seasons now with at least 10 wins. That, of course, prompted me to look up how many 10-win seasons in a row did New England have? Couldn't have been that many more than 10, right? No, 17 straight 10-win seasons for the Pats.
Wow. That's unbelievable. Insane. Unbelievable. Yeah. So now they're tasting how the other half lives right now. And it must be even harder knowing that. But Mahomes at that 33-yard run, he does this like 3 times a year where it's not just that he scrambles and he's got the first down already, but somehow he turns it into 20 more yards.
Yep.
Like he just squeezed through this gap. I really think tacklers expect him to go down or go out of bounds.
Or they don't want to hit him.
Right. Well, yeah, because we all remember the AFC Championship game with the Bengals where at least I remember the hit barely out of bounds and that gave him the game. Anyways, now I'm not bitter. It was still the right call. But it is kind of a reminder. You don't hit the franchise. You don't hit the NFL's top player out of bounds. And I think there is a fear of that for sure, especially in the open field.
Yeah. It's a really tough situation. I mean, Mahomes specifically is like the one guy you don't want to hit, with the history of getting those calls. So I get it. And I know this has come up a few times this year where, people are complaining on Twitter about Mahomes, taking advantage of knowing that guys won't hit him.
Well, you got to use every tool in your box.
I think at this point you just got to hit him and live with that because he's picking up more yards on the back end than he would, with the 15-yard penalty for hitting him late or a personal foul. So it's, if you're Mahomes, it's part of the reason why he is Mahomes is because he knows he gets those calls. He's smart enough to recognize it and not just, step out of bounds like most quarterbacks would. But for context, that's really what sealed it. Mahomes had a long run to pull them into field goal range. They were able to get a little closer and essentially make that a chip shot. But yeah, not the most convincing win by any means for KC, but they survive. They are home now for the Raiders in the Black Friday game.
Yeah. Mac Fam asked about Noah Gray, who had the 2 touchdowns. Is he a reliable pickup? I mean, his role is increasing, but he got 4 targets in this game. It's just 2 of them happen to be touchdowns.
He's got 4 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. I will say Carolina is the worst defense in the NFL against tight ends specifically. Yeah. So it's like, it's not shocking necessarily that he had this performance. I mean, it's brutal that it wasn't Travis Kelce because nobody's starting Noah Gray. But yeah, I think in like a 2 tight end league or, certainly in a Scott Fishbowl type of setup, he should be rostered.
Yeah. Boosted tight end scoring or week 14 by Apocalypse 2, Electric Boogaloo. I think that maybe you consider that. But yeah, other than that, I wouldn't say he's a top 12 tight end, but he's a top 20 tight end.
Yeah. I think that's fair. He's on the back end of that. It's touchdown dependent, right? I mean, he's like Roshan Johnson for tight ends.
Okay, there you go. Like that. Yeah. Inner sport comparison by Nick Whalen there. Cross position. Okay, let's talk a little about the Houston Texans Tennessee Titans game. Another bizarro game where we saw an elite field goal kicker miss a chip shot that would have tied the game late. And we're talking Fairbairn has been money nails this year. He misses a kick at the absolute worst possible time.
Yeah, and he had set the NFL record early in the game for most 50-plus yard field goals made in a season. I think it was 12. So we're celebrating Fairbairn, and then he sets up for what should be, probably the easiest field goal attempt of his entire season, 29 yards, and completely yanks it left. It was if you're watching this game, it was basically a foregone conclusion that he was going to make it. We were going to have a tie game. We might be looking at overtime. Tennessee was going to have under 2 minutes left to try to put something together. And I mean, outside of Commanders, Cowboys, I think this would have been the most chaotic game in like any other week of the season. Texans essentially score right away. They get an 80-yard kickoff return by Dameon Pierce. Well, I don't even think of Dameon Pierce as like a kick returner, but he brings it almost all the way back. Next play, they score. It looks like it's going to be a romp. The Titans hit their usual array of big plays at a long touchdown to a wide open Nick Westbrook-Akina. At one point, he now has 6 touchdowns in the last 7 games. Chika Okonkwo rose from the dead and had a long catch and run for a touchdown, outran everybody on that Texans defense. Calvin Ridley had a long play. So Tennessee, this passing game is always going to be anemic week to week, but they are turning into almost a Colts-like offense where you just kind of count on these random big plays being sprinkled in. They also still make a ton of mistakes. Had a huge fumble by Tony Pollard before the half. That came after Houston had just drove down for a touchdown to Nico Collins. They immediately hit another big play to Nico Collins right after that. But CJ Stroud ends up throwing the first of 2 terrible interceptions right before the half to take points off the board for Houston. Just a bizarre back and forth game where it felt like Will Levis on balance kind of outplayed CJ Stroud. He was also sacked 8 times in this game. He was sacked 7 times in the first half. Second time this year that Will Levis has taken 7 sacks in a half. The other time came against Green Bay. I tweeted this out, Jeff. So since 2000, we're talking 25 years essentially, teams are 8-77-1 straight up when their quarterback is sacked 8 times. So Will Levis joined Tommy DeVito, Blaine Gabbert, Kevin Cobb, JT O'Sullivan, Eli Manning, Josh McCown, and Mark Brunell as the NFL quarterbacks who have
an
won a
illustrious
game.
List there.
Yeah, an elite fraternity, if you will, of NFL quarterbacks who have won a game in the last 25 years while taking 8 sacks. Mark Brunell, by the way, did it in back-to-back games for the 2001 Jags.
That's insane. Just utterly insane. But that's the life we're living. The Levising is you get the good and the bad with him. The good is you get Calvin Ridley every week now, 5 for 93. You mentioned Westbrook-Akine. He's not getting the target volume that we'd want, but he finds a way to do it. Even Chig chimes in with the 70-yard touchdown. Who knew?
That was crazy. Yeah. Like I knew we knew he was an athlete. I didn't know he had that kind of speed. I mean, he ran past everybody. Like it's not like this was like some sort of, moon ball where he catches it over his shoulder. Like he caught that and ran like 50 of the 70 yards. That was on the first play, by the way, of a Titans drive midway through the fourth quarter. Houston had just tacked on a field goal to make it a 4-point game. And, at that point, if you were watching this game live, they noted like, yeah, Houston is yelling at each other on the sidelines. Everybody's upset. And, then that Titans play happens and it feels like, all right, we're throwing this to even more of a frenzy on the Houston side. Just such a chaotic game game overall. Only the second cover of the year, by the way, by the Tennessee Titans. And, you look ahead now to week 13, Titans are on the road at Washington. That's a Commanders team that's looking shaky. That might not have its 2 running backs. Like if you're looking for a spot for, kind of a straight up money line play, I don't mind riding the wave with the Titans right now. It feels like this is a team that, despite their record, despite this being a disastrous season, is starting to play some of their best ball of the year.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. And meanwhile, Houston, very disappointing performance all around. Joe Mixon, 14 of 22 on this one after tearing it up on Monday night. I know Tennessee is a stout test against the run, but this was eye-opening.
Yeah,
really,
they're a great run defense, man. They've been that all year. That's kind of been their one calling card defensively. I mean, they held the Texans to 40 rushing yards as a team. They held Minnesota to 82 a week ago. They held Buffalo under 75 rushing yards. They held the Colts under 85 rushing yards. So they've had a few of these performances this year. And again, I think they're catching Washington at a good time. Houston, meanwhile, goes on the road to Jacksonville in week 13. And that is a Jaguars team that may be getting Trevor Lawrence back. We've seen some line movement already. It's down to 5.5 in favor of Houston. Ooh. Lawrence going through practice today. They're saying there's a chance that he could return on Sunday.
Yeah. And a chance that they might still fight. But again, I mean, they're under that weird position of trying to fight for the number 1 overall pick, maybe not. I'm amazed Doug Peterson hasn't been fired yet. I'm Prez Taylor should be fired into the sun. Not just merely fired. Balky, same thing. I don't know. It's an odd situation, but Tennessee, I mean, Houston, I mean, they're just not right. They're just off a little bit. They had that big game on Monday night, but even that was a little weird too. A lot of that was driven by like the defensive score and all that.
Yeah, I don't think that one was quite as convincing. I know the final score was, but that game was in the balance more than anybody thought it would be, or probably more than it should have been against Dallas. So, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I don't think Houston has really strung together like 2 or 3 impressive games in a row this entire season, and they are very, very fortunate, Jeff, that they play in the AFC South because nobody is threatening them in that division.
That's true. They're still 7-5. Comfortable lead in the division for sure, to be sure. Let's talk a little bit about a very impactful game in the NFC West. You kind of alluded to it here that the NFC West is all jumbled up, and it's partly because Seattle utterly shut down Arizona yesterday, 16-6. Every time I looked up on that game, it was like 2nd and 18 for the Cardinals. They just could not get out of their own way.
Yeah, both teams took some brutal penalties in this game. Seattle does that every single week. This was pretty uncharacteristic, though, from Arizona, which have been really rock solid, especially defensively the last few weeks. But you got to tip your cap to Seattle for their defensive effort. Arizona was actually at 5.3 yards per play, which is not that bad. I mean, Seattle's at 4.7. This was not a great offensive game by Seattle by any means, but they were able to get the Cardinals off the field on third downs. Arizona, 3 of 13 on 3rd and 4th down. They've been a really good third down team for the most part this season. The game started with 6 consecutive punts. We had 8 punts on the first 9 drives. This was one that you just knew was cruising under essentially like 5 minutes into the game. The pick 6 by Kyler Murray is really, what broke this game open for Seattle, as much as a 16-6 game can be broken open. That was on a 4th and 1. Incredible job by Devin Witherspoon, the second-year corner out of Illinois, to, they showed it again on the broadcast. Basically ran a read option where Kyler pulled the ball out and then scrambled right and had the option to run or pass. And Witherspoon somehow played the run and then was able to scramble back and put pressure on Kyler Murray, forcing a misthrow. I mean, that was the Geno Smith play, right? That was the play you see from Geno every single week. And it was Kyler who ended up making it. Now, Seattle then had a chance to really put this game away, make it at least a 16-3 game, if not a 20-3 game. And Geno Smith throws just another brutal pick in the end zone on a 3rd and 6 at about the 15-yard line. Scrambling around, throws it right into the arms of a defender. So it briefly got a little bit dicey because Arizona was able to go down, tack on a field goal, make it a 1-score game. But Seattle came through, Jason Myers with a 50-yarder to essentially put it away with just under 2 minutes left. Did you think the Harrison play was a catch? No. As somebody who bet the Seahawks, no. I actually didn't, though. No, I thought he was out.
Yeah. Maybe it's just because someone who used Harrison in a number of places, including DFS. I did. But, I also am looking through very rose-colored eyes as that. Yeah. And the thing is, we play this game every week. What is a catch? What is not a catch? But I get it. There. But that was a huge swing play in this game, obviously. That was massive. And it ended up being that Harrison was limited to 3 for 47, had 6 targets. I know Trey McBride play was working, but it would have been nice to see those wideouts be a little bit more involved. McBride, 12 for 133, 15 targets in this game. Yeah, it was kind of a Trey McBride show offensively for Arizona. Caught 12 of those for 133. Did not find the end zone, of course, so that's frustrating, but still a huge day for him. Arizona could not run the ball whatsoever. I think that was the big thing. And they've run on everybody over the last 3 or 4 games. James Conner, 7 carries for 8 yards. We saw a little bit of Trey Benson. We briefly saw a little bit of Amari DiMercato. None of those guys were really able to get anything going. 14 carries for 49 yards total, including Kyler Murray for the Arizona offense. So if you're looking for kind of one reason why Arizona was not able to win this game, just a complete shutdown of that ground game by the Seattle defense. I don't really have too much else here. I mean, the Seattle offensive line, I think, is still a major issue. They were a huge liability throughout this game. Yep. Jackson Smith-Njigba had himself a nice day, 6 for 77 and a touchdown. I swear to God, he loses like 40 to 50 yards every week on holding calls or penalties or pick plays. Like,
it always feels like there's like a huge play to JSN, and we got to check the flag. And it looks like this one's coming back.
Yep.
So Seattle is still just an extremely mistake-prone team. I don't trust anybody right now in the NFC West. I have no idea who's going to win that division. I still think all 4 teams are very much alive.
Agreed. All are alive and all are flawed.
Yeah, big time.
And it's absolutely. I mean, thing is, like as MacFam says, Seahawks in the last couple of weeks have locked down CMC and Connor. So pretty impressive stuff. And lockdown Murray. Let's be, that I think that's the thing is, Murray usually you can count on like a base of 50 rushing yards or something, or 30 rushing yards at least. And he got 9 yesterday. And a lot of times he only had 2 attempts, but a lot of times he chose to throw because the running wasn't open.
He was also sacked 5 times. And I've talked on this show about how like impossible it is to bring him down. Like that guy wiggles out of sacks more than just about anybody, other than maybe Caleb Williams, by the way, who dodged like 7 sacks against Minnesota. But sacking Kyler Murray 5 times is not nothing. I mean, that does not happen. I looked it up on StatHead. I think he's only been sacked 5 times, like 6 times in his career. And the vast majority of those came early on, when he walked in as the number 1 pick to a terrible team. So it's been a long time since Kyler Murray has had a game like that where, he's not only pressured, but is actually being brought down.
Yeah, exactly right. All right. We're going to talk about the rest of the games, and we'll probably hit these up a little bit quicker. First, a quick note from our good friends over at Circa Resort and Casino. All right. Thanks to Circa. Thanks to you guys for your patience there. Let's talk Bucs-Giants. Malik Neighbors ranted after the game about not getting targeted until the third quarter. He wasn't targeted until it was 30-0 in this game. Guess Tommy Cutlets isn't going to work out. He got hurt in this game. I know a little bit. They think he might be able to play Thursday night, but still, Neighbors had 6 catches all in the second half after they were way behind. Yeah,
this was a thorough beatdown by the Buccaneers. I had a pretty bad day with my total picks. Jeff went 0 for 3 on my unders for Bookies Plus, but this was my 5-star play was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers covering the 5.5 here. I thought they'd be ready to go coming out of the bye. They absolutely were. Started this game with a 14-play, 8+ minute drive for a touchdown. Sean Tucker came in to vulture the touchdown on that drive after it was Bucky Irving and Rachaad White doing most of the work.
Mm-hmm.
You just knew right away that that the DeVito experiment was not going to go well. His first drop back of the game just took a huge sack, massive hit. Really wasn't until later in the game, of course, when he was knocked out after taking another big hit. But the Giants just could not do anything offensively. No. They had 19 total yards on their first 3 drives of the game. A Baker rushing touchdown put Tampa Bay up 23-0 late in the first half. They actually missed the extra point on that. Did not end up mattering. The New York Giants, their first third down conversion of the day came at the 11-minute mark in the third quarter. They drove that all the way down to the 5-yard line and then promptly fumbled. So that's the kind of the day it was. Even when they put together a decent drive, they end up, squandering that. Buccaneers ended up outgaining the Giants 450 to 245. And like you mentioned, Malik Neighbors sounded off a little bit after the game. He's already got the wide receiver 1 kind of aura about him. Midway through your rookie year, you're already complaining about lack of targets. We like to see that. His mother also doubled down on it on Twitter last night. So we like to see that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Some definitely wide receiver 1 energy there for sure. Tyrone Tracy with that fumble in the red zone led to Devin Singletary getting the touchdown later. You hate to see that. Although there was some talk later that, he'll get more chances, Tracy will, but this is 2 weeks in a row with 2 games in a row that Tracy's had a critical fumble on this one. 4 different rushers, 4 touchdowns for the Bucs. Bucky Irving, Rachaad White, Baker Mayfield, and Tucker, all with rushing touchdowns. Led to no passing touchdowns. This is kind of what you expect against the Giants, though, too. They're really good at shutting down the pass. There's questions in the forum about, do we drop K. Dotton after his 1 for 30? No. Just they're good at stopping tight ends. And when you can run like crazy against them, why would you pass more? So this is just a game script sort of situation. Don't worry.
Yeah, super frustrating. I started K. Dotton over Tucker Kraft in one important league. It's like Kraft, of course, like immediately scores a touchdown in the first quarter against the Niners. But no, I wouldn't be panicking about Dotton at all. Just a bad game script for him. Buccaneers led this game by 3+ scores for like 80% of game time. And, did have a long play called back on a penalty as well. So it was never going to be a huge day for K. Dotton, but it should have been a little bit better than it was. I still think the volume is going to be there when they play more competitive scripts. Mike Evans, I thought looked good. Didn't find the end zone, but essentially played as close to a full snap share as he could. The Buccaneers called off the dogs for a lot of the second half. So none of their receivers, played more than 41 snaps. That was Jalen McMillan, but Evans looked fine, made it through unscathed.
Yes, indeed. Dolphins, Patriots. This game wasn't as close as the 34-15 score indicates, and 34-15 isn't close.
No, a couple fluky plays made this look a lot more respectable than it was. I mean, it was 31-0 Dolphins in the third quarter, and then the Patriots were in desperation mode about as early as you get. Like, they went for, I think it was like a 4th and 15 for their first touchdown of the game, 4th and 15 with 14 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and Drake May just basically heaved up a Hail Mary that was caught by Austin Hooper, who was able to back his way into the end zone. So that put them on the board, and then they had a fumble return by Christian Gonzalez for the second touchdown. But yeah, I mean, this game was over early on. I thought New England came out, looked pretty live. Both teams punted on their first drives. New England gets an early stop. You're like, all right. They put together a really nice second drive, and then missed a very makeable field goal, a 45-yarder. And once that went awry, the floodgates started to open. 4 straight scoring drives, including 3 touchdowns for Miami before half.
Exactly. It was over. The thing that caught my eye was it was a Jalen Waddle week all of a sudden.
It was
after we spent kind of too much time kind of ripping on his production, wondering, is he not demoted? No. 8 for 144 in this one. Hey, if Christian Gonzalez is going to spend all of his time on Tyreek Hill, let's go to Waddle and Jonnu Smith instead. And that seemed like that worked.
Yeah, Jonnu Smith still a huge part of this offense. It did not come at the expense of Jalen Waddle at all, right? It kind of felt like it had been a trade-off for the last month or so.
Yep.
But Jonnu Smith had the first touchdown of the game. He was targeted 11 times, caught 9 of those for 87 yards. He continues to be really, really good, and I think startable, on a weekly basis at this point. Chop Robinson, the rookie out of Penn State for Miami, he's playing really well. Had a sack and a half, 3 quarterback hits in this one. Patriots had the worst yards per play game of the week, unsurprisingly, at 4.3. Another good note that I saw on Twitter today, Jeff, speaking of Tyreek Hill, Chris Godwin still has more receiving yards on the year than Tyreek Hill does. Tyreek Hill has not missed a single game all season. Godwin obviously has been out for a month. One last thing I'll say on the Miami side, because they play Thanksgiving night at Green Bay. It's looking like the temperatures are going to be in the low 20s. It's definitely Packers weather. There are some injuries on the Green Bay side of things I think could kind of standardize this game. I don't think Romeo Doubs is going to be out there. He left with a concussion yesterday. They're not going to have Jair Alexander. So we'll see. I think Miami can hang around, but the Dolphins still cannot run the ball, man. I mean, this should be a spot, right? Where you're up big. You're going up against a bad run defense. Devon Achane, 10 carries for 32 yards. This has become all too common for Miami this season. They've just not been able to get that ground game going.
Yeah, they can't. Mostert is an afterthought in this offense now. And I think, he provided a lot of those like 6-7 yard chunks last year. And that's just not happening at all this year. The flip side is neither could New England run the ball. Ramondre Stevenson, 8 for 13 in this one. Just a throwaway game. And that's the problem with where you're at with any of the Pats individual players right now, is you can't start any of them. Not with a whole lot of confidence. Douglas, he gets his 60 yards. Okay, great. Never scores. Hunter Henry was startable earlier, but it was Hooper that got that fluke touchdown this time. There's no floor.
No, the Patriots never even reached the red zone in this game. I mean, that's not that uncommon for them. They had 5 drives in the first half, and 4 of them were 3 and outs.
We are on the BlueWire network. We thank them for their hosting. Here are their ads. Lions-Colts. This was just kind of a slow, steady, just put them away sort of game, taking care of business game for the Lions. The thing I'll be watching for is David Montgomery's status going into the Thursday game.
Yeah, that's a big one. This is the second time now this year where we've had an injury scare with him, and the first one, didn't end up being anything too serious. We'll see. Left in the third quarter with a shoulder injury. This was kind of a weird game, right? We had a ton of overs in general in week 12, specifically in the early window. It was not a good week to be me and be on all these unders, but this was, I think, a game that I thought could easily go north of 50, right? And it ends up 24-6 in favor of Detroit. So just 30 points on the board, only 10 points scored in the second half. All those were by the Detroit Lions. Kind of an off-kilter game, I guess, for Detroit, which says a lot because they still put up almost 400 yards of offense. They were great on third downs. The defense obviously stepped up in a big way. A ton of penalties for the Colts, 10 penalties. They lost 75 yards, just in terms of penalty yardage. And I saw a good tweet yesterday by a Colts beat writer who said that they had 97 yards of offense also erased by those penalties. So that's a 172-yard swing when you include the plays on the penalized plays plus the penalty yards, which just absolutely killed any chance of the Colts getting back in this one. Josh Downs, also somebody to monitor. He went out with a shoulder injury. They're already saying he's expected to sit this week against New England.
Yep, exactly. Anthony Richardson was very inaccurate, 11 for 28. At least he got you 60 rush yards. Let's talk Jonathan Taylor. How worried are we about Jonathan Taylor? 11 for 35, not a single target in the passing game. Yeah. Not what you paid for.
Not what you paid for at all. I mean, this is now 2 consecutive games where he's been completely shut down. Maybe you would expect that against the Lions. You probably never thought this would be a crazy high volume day for him on the ground. But yeah, the evaporation of the passing game, right? I mean, that's really the scary part here. He has 7 receptions over his last 5 games. It's not like this was just some unique situation. You know, you should have been able to I thought, pile up yards on the Jets last week. 24 carries for 57 yards. That is not a good Jets defense. Ironically, ran well against the Buffalo Bills a few weeks ago, but he has had way too many of these type of games. 16 for 48 against Houston, 21 for 88 against Pittsburgh, 13 for 48 against Minnesota. The volume has not been an issue, but the efficiency has just been brutal. 4.4 yards per carry now on the year, and a couple big games are boosting up that number.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess when you're playing in long down and distance, that means fewer running attempts. See also all those penalties again. And that might have something to do with it there. They are outgained 390 to 268. They only had the ball for 23 minutes in this game. Wow. That explains a lot of it there. But it's been 2 bad rushing games in a row since Richardson came back for Taylor. And I wonder, I thought it would be the opposite effect. I thought Richardson coming back would help Taylor. That has not been the case so far.
Colts are dead last in the NFL in time of possession by a lot. That's really been the case for most of the year, but that discrepancy just continues to grow and grow every week. They have a really tough time sustaining drives. I actually didn't think Richardson was that bad. He was nowhere near as good as he was last week. But once again, the penalties were huge. Had a lot of plays called back. Had some drops. There's a drop touchdown by Kylan Granson. I think that would have boosted his line a little bit. It wasn't a good game, but it wasn't a total disaster. And this was a competitive game. Going into most of the second half. Right, Detroit came out and got stuffed on a 4th down for their first drive of the second half. At that point, it's a 1-score game. But the Colts go punt out on downs in the 5 drives in the second half. So really, it was the Detroit defense that won this game for them. I thought the Colts defense played about as well as you could expect, right? I mean, you're holding the Detroit Lions to 24 points in a dome, I think is almost a best case scenario. Jared Goff, by the way, was 15 of 16 passing when he was targeting over the middle of the field in this game. And the other fantasy note that I have, Amon-Ra St. Brown up to the wide receiver 2 on the year in total PPR points. He's still 50 points behind Jamar Chase, and those are the only 2 receivers with at least 200 PPR points so far.
Wow.
Last year at this time, we had 8.
You're the running back. I mean, we keep pressing that point, and this is no better illustration of that. Okay, final game. Broncos and the Raiders here. This was a game, granted it's a short week, so we kind of read through these. This was a game. This is definitely like an undercard sort of game. It starts it's the 105 game start. You always know that, or for you, that'd be 305. Before like the Packers game starts, they're already 20 minutes into the game.
Yeah. This one, I feel like we got paid back for losing the Vikings cover because I was on the Broncos here. They did not deserve to cover this game by any means. I thought the Raiders actually played pretty well, maybe outplayed Denver, at least in the first half. And then, the usual cavalcade of mistakes came raining down for the Raiders in the second half. They throw a pick on their first drive of the second half. They punt a couple of times. They end up losing a fumble. That was Desmond Ridder, by the way, who came in relief of Gardner Minshew, who I think is probably done for the year, broken collarbone.
Yeah,
for Minshew. Yeah, Ridder came in, immediately took that sack fumble, and you're just like, all right, here we go. Did end up leading what could have been a garbage time touchdown drive. They got all the way down to the 1-yard line, had a chance to cover, and then Ridder gets sacked on, I think it was 2nd down, and they didn't have a timeout, so time just ran out. It's just classic Raiders. I think most coaches would have taken the field goal there. That's become the trendy thing when you're down 2 scores, to take the field goal and then try your luck with the onside kick. Antonio Pierce said, no, thank you. Didn't end up getting any points. Had no chance to end up winning this game. But it does sound like Aiden O'Connell has a good chance to be back for the Black Friday game against the Chiefs. So I think we're going to avoid the worst case scenario of seeing Desmond Ridder because I'm still hoping that Aiden O'Connell could do enough to keep Jacoby Myers alive in fantasy.
I'm going to plan a name here for you right now. Daniel Jones.
Maybe that would be great. I'll take that.
He clears waivers today. Apparently, he's been contacted by 10 teams, including one team that wants him to start, according to Jay Glazer. Jones would prefer to be on a playoff contender, but obviously he's not going to play on a playoff contender. But
yeah,
I mean, he would be better, I think, than Ritter, than O'Connell. But I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
How much better? I'm not so sure. We'll see.
Yeah.
By the way, go ahead.
Go ahead. I think if Daniel Jones goes to the Raiders, like I think the point is it becomes like an audition for next year, I guess. Mm-hmm. Although if you're the Raiders, you're probably looking at a quarterback in the draft. That would be a weird fit. It would make sense in terms of a plug and play,
right?
But it wouldn't really meet Daniel Jones' criteria. It's like I guess does he want to ring chase as like the third quarterback for a good team? Because like you said, no good quarterback or no good team is looking to bring in a new starting quarterback right now.
Exactly. By the way, I do think it was the right call to go for the touchdown. You're all the way down there. What's more likely, you scoring a touchdown and then getting, the field goal to tie later on, or getting the points, getting the ball, and then driving all the way down the field again? I think teams go to that kick too reflexively.
I think the problem was they had burned their last time out,
mm-hmm.
and you can't. Well, for one, you can't take a sack. I guess in theory, if you throw for a touchdown on second down, you'd have like 15 seconds, so you could recover an onside kick and maybe get a miracle play. Like I don't know what's going on in Antonio Pierce's head. Ultimately it probably would not have mattered. But the Vikings muffing the onside kick like 2 hours earlier is still kind of fresh in the mind. But yeah, overall it was a very Raiders game. It felt fitting that Ritter came in and lost a fumble and got a sack on the last play of the game. We mentioned Amir Abdullah at the top. Ended up paying dividends, man. I started him over Zach Charbonnet. I didn't feel good about either option, but he got the touchdown. He had 5 catches on 6 targets. Sincere McCormick ended up being the leading rusher for the Las Vegas Raiders. Sincere McCormick, 5 carries, 33 yards.
Yeah. So funny. I thought Dylan Laub was going to be a thing. He took the opening kickoff.
Yeah.
Had a nice return. You're like, okay, this is the chance.
Yeah, he looked fast.
Yeah. Like, oh, okay. Nope. Not a single touch on offense there. So Interesting. Meanwhile, the Broncos, they continue to screw us with the running backs. It was a Jaleel McLaughlin day, 7 for 44. Javonte Williams, 8 for -2 against the Raiders.
The Raiders defensive line was actually awesome in this game. Like they were all over. Like Bo Nix only took 1 sack, but there were a number of Broncos drives that ended with Bo Nix, kind of having to throw it away or just, getting his arm hit as he was throwing. Like I actually thought the Raiders defense showed up and made this a lot more difficult than it should have been for Denver. And honestly, the fact that the Broncos got to 29 points in this game just says a lot about the development of this offense. Like if this exact game happened in like week 3, they either lose or they win it like 20-19. They get a defensive score. Like I know it's not going to go down as like an excellent game for Bo Nix, 25 of 42 for 273, but I continue to be blown away at the progress that he's made.
Yeah, he has been fantastic. He and Sutton have this bond. Devon Vele, 6 for 80 in this one here too. This is like he's consistently become a thing. This was a guy that people were all over in training camp and in the preseason, and usually those kind of wash away as this regular season comes on. But Vele looks like he can play. So
Cortland Sutton, by the way, is the wide receiver 3 since week 6, or including week 6. And that includes a 0. He took a 0 in week 7, and he's still the wide receiver 3 in total PPR. He's top 10 receiver now on the year.
Yeah. Having a nice run. They have this connection here. So, Broncos are now 7-5. They're really well positioned in the wild card race now too.
They should be. Yeah. I mean, obviously they're not going to win their division with KC there, but they're hanging on to that last spot. They have a 1.5 game lead over Miami. It's hard to feel good about the Colts. The Bengals are still technically alive there. We'll see what happens with them coming out of the bye. Denver's remaining schedule: home against the Browns, home against the Colts, at the Chargers, at the Bengals, and then what could be a gift: home against the Chiefs in week 18.
Yeah. Can they get 3 wins out of that? Probably. If they get to 10, I think they're in.
Yeah. Oh, I think 10 gets you in. 9 maybe gets you in, depending on what happens.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Bengals game specifically, and really the Chargers game, will probably decide. You got to win one of those, I would say, if you're Denver, to feel really good. Chances are, the Chiefs might not need that game in week 18, but they might to hang on to the 1 seed. So
right.
I think you want to get that out of the way if you're Denver. If you can go 3-1 over the next 4, then you're in.
Yeah, exactly right. Had a couple of questions real quick. I want to hit up. Eric was asking, trade Terry McLaurin for Isaiah Pacheco. Would you do that?
If you really need running back help, perhaps. Obviously Pacheco didn't play this week. Should be back out there on Friday. It is, a semi-short week for KC, so we'll see. I think the volume's going to be there for Pacheco. I think he's a much better option than what the Chiefs have been rolling out for the last couple of months.
Yeah,
McLaurin, I don't know, man. It's like McLaurin just finds a way every single week. Like you'll check your fantasy score midway through the third quarter, and he'll have like one catch for 8 yards. And then you check it 2 hours later and he somehow has 22 fantasy points. So like, I don't understand how he keeps doing it. There's been a lot of plays like what we saw at the end against Dallas that kind of bail him out every week. I wouldn't necessarily want to punt on that, especially with the Washington ground game starting to slow down. But it depends on your team needs. If you're really needy at running back, I think that's a totally fair deal. But I would be wary of missing out on some of these McLaurin games.
Yeah, and it might be frustrating this first week back, assuming Pacheco comes back this week too. But then again, McLaurin had 16 yards before that crazy play at the end of the game. Right. And then he had 2 bad weeks in a row prior to that too. So I get it. I get where you're coming from with that one there. Another wide receiver question, another McLaurin related question. Trone says he's got Tyreek, Kupp, McLaurin, JSN, Mooney, and D-Hop. That's a lot of inventory there. Feeling unsure about Tyreek and McLaurin, for sure. Who should he trade away, Tyreek or McLaurin?
Man, I'm still holding out hope for Tyreek Hill. I know it's been ugly. I know Jonnu Smith has kind of swooped in here. I still think there's going to be a pretty reasonable floor with Tyreek Hill. And we talked about Miami, another team that can't run the ball. It's going to be a pass-based offense. I think it's hard to look back at these first 12 weeks and think that it could be any worse for Tyreek Hill. Like I still think if I had to trade one of those guys, I would trade McLaurin. You might be able to get more for Tyreek Hill though, just because of the name value. Yeah. But I think I would rather trade McLaurin. That
would be my answer is if you're bent on doing a trade, you need to upgrade a running back, trade whichever of those gets you the most back. Because that's the whole point of making this deal.
Yeah. You're loaded at receiver. It's like you're probably not going to take a massive hit on either of those because you have so many options.
Whatever gets you a startable running back has got to be the key to that. All right, guys, thanks for the comments and questions all throughout the live stream. If you're catching us on the podcast, thank you for downloading and listening. If you like this podcast, go hit like and please subscribe to wherever you're catching it. And if you want to check out RotoWire, in addition to that, rotowire.com/pod will get you there. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Good luck Monday night, and good luck getting ready for Thanksgiving week. Take care.